professional cynic, but my heart's not in it. I'm paying the price of living life at the limit, caught up in a century's anxiety. It preys on him. He's getting thin. Try living the simple life. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now floating in Screamacelica. My name's Kevin Graham, and tonight I'm joined by the main man himself, Paul John Dykes. How's it gone, mate?
It's been a long time since you and I were in this position, Kevin. This is the original lineup. Simple as that.
It's the original lineup, yes.
But now you're behind the wheel, mate. You're at the wheel. How does it feel?
It feels good. It's a DeLorean now. It's no longer a bus. It's no longer it's a DeLorean. I like my DeLorean. It takes me back to 1985, Back to the Future, and it's everything's great. Thanks to everybody that's listening in, week on week. The numbers are unbelievable. We seem to have a bit of a cult following. So hopefully they're going to enjoy it tonight, because we're all sick fed up, the Celtic stuff and all of that, So we're going to have a wee look at the Euros, because we're 2 weeks away from the start of the big European Championship, which Scotland have actually qualified for. So there is a bit of national interest for those who are going to take national interest in this type of thing. And it takes me back to Euro 96. And I remember the build-up to Euro 96. So I think it's maybe one of those times, It's like 1996, I'm 20. It's the height of Britpop. It seemed to be a brilliant summer, and you've got this football tournament on your own doorstep, which means that you're going to see all the games. Scotland have qualified for it as well, and what actually happens, you get a group with England in it. So everything just sort of sums up. This is going to be a great summer. You've also got right, if we're all being honest, we're also maybe, especially guys my age, are on the Tony Blair train as well. We've seen Tony Blair in charge of Labour, and we think they're going to become the next government, which they do. That's before we realise what Tony Blair actually was. But if you're going back to that time, you wouldn't have heard many guys my age, many guys with my own political views, who would have a bad word to say about Tony Blair at that time. But you're talking about me, who was 20 at that time. I'd never seen anything but a Conservative government. So maybe
I was 17. I was 17 in this month that you're referring to, Kev. So you're absolutely right. We'd been brought up with Thatcher and John Major, hadn't we?
Definitely, aye. And I mean, you'll always remember, you'll remember your dad, my dad, after general elections being utterly gutted. Absolute gutted that we were going to go under a Conservative government again. Yourself, your dad was a striking miner. You remember that. And I come from Bannockburn, and you've got the pit villages round about Bannockburn as well. And you could see the decline of these areas as the 80s went on. And I don't think a lot of the younger generations actually realise how bad Thatcher was for Scotland as a country. And we had Michael Forsyth as an MP for years in Stirling. We could never get the Conservatives out of Stirling until the 1997 general election.
It's absurd. It's absurd when you look back, Kev. I mean, that period in my life, the miners' strike, my dad, as you quite rightly say, he's a pitman. And, going through that, thinking back to the damage it did, not only at the time, but ever since, because my folks still live in the villages, the West Five villages of Fife, as does one of my sisters, my brother. You go out there and they are still feeling the effects, because there is no industry. Whereas in the past, generations of men would go down the pit. That was all ended. It ruined communities, it ruined families. Men went elsewhere to work. My dad ended up having to go abroad. We were all over the place. We went, my dad had jobs in Norway and France and Denmark, all these different places. Almost ended up in Abu Dhabi. So, when you're looking at that, Kev, a lot of families didn't survive that. A lot of communities didn't survive it. Those who went back to work will forever be known as scabs. It tore communities apart. And that was the Thatcher. I mean, people think about the miners' strike. It was 12 months without a wage. 12 months without coal, because you used to get your coal free. You know, and 4 kids, all under the age of something like 7. You know, and trying to feed that. I always remember, so I know that this is a name that a lot of Celtic fans may not like, but the old Graham Souness quote, and it was when he was a Liverpool manager, Kev. They were playing Sunderland, whose left back was Anton Rogan, in the FA Cup final. I'm not checking Wiki, but I think it was 1992. And this was after Souness had his triple heart bypass operation. They're talking about the pressure. He says, this isn't pressure. Pressure is living in a high-rise with 4 screaming bairns and no wages during the miners' strike. He says, that's pressure. And he's right. It left a mark on me and many, many others like me, and I've been politicised ever since.
Definitely. Round about the area that I stayed, my cousin will actually say he can remember miners coming round the doors for food parcels, asking for food. I can't remember that, but he says it's one of his abiding memories of that time, that there was miners coming to people's doors asking for food. And it's horrible, absolutely horrible. And it's interesting, Souness does say that because of his whole persona, like yuppified persona that he had in the 80s, if you have a look at that. But then again, he grew, well, he didn't grow up in Liverpool, but he played virtually his whole football career in Liverpool, and Liverpool was another community which was bastardised by Thatcher. And I reckon the miners and the Scots have been exactly the same.
Definitely.
When you think about that. But we're actually in a glow of positivity going into 1996. We are. And we've got this tournament, it's down the road, and we're getting told that football comes home. That was the tagline of the tournament. What
was your hairdo? We're in the DeLorean. We need to try and paint a picture here to the viewers, right? It's 1996. Did you say you were 20?
20, aye.
You're 20, I'm 17. So come on, describe the fosh before we go any further. Seeing how that's obviously quite an important part of proceedings these days.
It was basically just like a shaggy mullet type middle.
A bit of Tim Burgess going on.
A bit of Tim Burgess going on, aye. I just used to just sit there and I just used to grow it. And when my hair gets to a certain length, goes to about there, then it just starts going curly. It just starts going up the way instead of going down the way.
I'd like to see that.
It's quite mad. I'm sure that there is pictures somewhere.
Photographic evidence.
I'm sure there is photographic evidence somewhere. Now, this tournament was like the first tournament which 3 points from a win came in as well, which is unusual. It was the first tournament where the golden goal was a thing. I can't remember if it carried on being a thing after this, but definitely Germany won by a golden goal in this. And so Scotland played England. I was having a look. I says, how did Scotland actually qualify for this tournament? Now, Scotland qualified as being the 4th best runner-up in the whole of Europe. So they finished behind Russia in the group. Our group contained Russia, Greece, Finland, the Faroes and San Marino. And we only lost one game in qualifying, and that was to Greece. So we finished second behind Russia with 23 points, and we were the 4th best runner-up in Europe, which meant we didn't need to play the Dutch in the playoffs. But who did play the Dutch, do you know?
I'm doing this through memory, Kev, because I'm obviously standing in for the main dude in the chair, which is Russell Boyce. So although I've done my research, I didn't go as far back as that.
The Republic of Ireland got beat off. Facebook user comes in with the answer there. The Republic of Ireland got beat in the playoff by the Netherlands for the 1996 Euros.
That's a shame. That's a shame because, you know, my first finals tournament was 88, Euro 88. And obviously I supported the Republic of Ireland, Kev. But that was... But I had so fond memories of Ireland playing in the finals, the tournaments, you know, World Cup 1990, of course, 1994. And it's a shame that they weren't a part of this.
It was a shame. But by that time, I think the Irish Jack Charlton boost was beginning to wear off after like 1994 in America. I think the Irish squad was actually aging. Kieran comes in and actually reminds me it was Jack Charlton's last game in charge of the Republic of Ireland. That playoff game against the Netherlands. Now, Scotland's squad was announced, and I'm going to read some names here that interested me when I saw this squad, Paul. Who do you think the third choice goalkeeper was? The first two goalkeepers were Andy Gorm and Jim Leighton. That was the first two goalkeepers.
1996. Let me think. Again, as I say, it's all through memory. None of this Wikipedia nonsense. So, Sullivan came later, didn't he? Mm-hmm. He was more kind of 98. Oh, it wasn't...
If I say he was playing for...
Give me a clue.
He was playing for Partick Thistle at the time.
It wasn't Nelson.
No. And...
Nicky Walker.
Nicky Walker.
Wow.
Nicky
what
Walker.
What a hairdo. I mean, seeing how, we can't get through a broadcast without some comment about hair. I don't know, what's the obsession with the hair Pokemon here? Oh, whatever. Nicky Walker had a great hairdo.
The only thing I can remember about Nicky Walker that he was married to one of the women on the back of the lager cans.
Was his wife a lager lovely?
His wife was a lager lovely, yes. when he was the Rangers goalkeeper. And what was even worse about this, he was only 33 in 1996.
Wow.
I was like, what? He's 33. The other thing that jumped out to me as well was Derek White was in the squad.
Brilliant.
Derek White.
I used to love Derek White. I loved Derek White. I really did.
Aye, Derek White was in the squad. He was playing for Middlesbrough at the time, and he was only 27.
26. Great tan. Always had a great tan. All year round tan.
How can you get a tan like that at Barrafield? That has to be explained.
That's why he moved to Dubai. Yeah, he was born in the wrong country. That's why he now lives in Dubai.
Aye. I mean, Ian, other in the squad, Ian Jess was there. Now, if somebody would have asked me who Ian Jess was playing for that time, I'd have said Aberdeen, but he was actually...
Can I have a guess? I was going to say Strachan signed him, didn't he?
He was at Coventry. And again, he was only 25 as well. I always pictured Ian Jess being in his 30s at this point.
Yes, yep.
And so the Celtic interest in the squad, right? The Celtic interest in the squad. Tom Boyd.
Yes.
Tosh McKinlay. And I'm claiming John Collins because he hadn't signed for Monaco by this point, or he was just about to sign for Monaco. I'm still having John Collins as a Celtic player.
I would still have Collins, yeah.
He's still a Celtic player at that point. Future interest, Darren Jackson was in the squad as well. So was Craig Burley. Mm-hmm. And also for me, the Celtic player that should have been Kevin Gallagher was in the squad. Always had a soft spot for Kevin Gallagher anyway. Yeah,
I agree with that. And actually, somebody else you mentioned there who I always wanted to sign for Celtic was Ian Jess. I always liked Jess as a young player. Scored far too many goals against us, but he scored a lot of goals against Rangers, and I know that he had spent some time at Rangers as a kid. But you always have that affinity towards players. I always go on about Bernie Slavin, Paul McGrath, Pat Nevin. Always wanted Pat Nevin for Celtic. But yeah, Kevin Gallagher was another one, as was Billy McKinlay, I've got to say.
Billy McKinlay was also in the squad as well. There's 3 Blackburn players in the squad. There was Billy McKinlay, Kevin Gallagher and Colin Hendry were the 3 Blackburn players in the squad. So when you have a look at the Scotland squad, I'm not going to read it all. It was a very old squad, but that was what Creedbound done. And when you look back on it, it's a very workmanlike squad. But if you go through qualification, you only get beat once. Then it's like... You can't be that bad. So, we're at Wembley. We're outside Wembley on the 15th of June 1996. Mm-hmm. And it's a scorching day. I do remember this day. It was absolutely boiling on this day. And the place is buzzing. I remember Bannockburn at that time, there was flags everywhere. Everybody was really, really buzzing for the game. And I don't think that's something that's caught on yet when you have a look at the build-up to this. this tournament because I think it's just a situation that we're in.
Yeah. Kev, I can remember it vividly. I remember the house I was in watching that particular game. I could tell you what jeans I was wearing. Honestly, I can remember it vividly, mate.
What jeans were you wearing? Come on, let us.
I'm going to tell you, mate. I was wearing a pair of chippies.
Chippy jeans?
Chippy jeans. I had a 1990 Shaun Ryder haircut because I'm always out of step. So I was only 6 years out of step there, right? I'm now 20 years, or maybe even 21 years out of step, but that's fine. I remember these things. Chippy jeans, mate.
Chippy jeans.
Yes.
I would have had Levi's. I was into the Levi's by that point. Yeah. I was working and I could afford to buy myself a pair of Levi's. I couldn't afford chippy jeans. I wasn't a malt boy. It's only malt boys that could afford chippy jeans in my area.
I was into the papers, mate.
Aye. So Scotland line up that day. After we were at Villa Park before that, and we had actually drew with the Dutch. We drew nothing each with a fantastic Dutch side, and England had drew with Switzerland. So this was basically, if you won this game, you had virtually qualified for the knockout stages. Still, everybody had qualified for the knockout stages. One of the first things I noticed when I was researching this. And Euro 96 gets a lot of these ITV4 documentaries, when you get, Terry Venables and the lads all sitting round talking about it, and they go, this was great, and you get some comedians that you've never heard of talking about, they've just so happened just to watch the highlights before they've been, asked the questions, But see the amount of empty seats that are at these games in Euro 96 is quite frightening for something that was on your doorstep.
Yeah.
The Scotland game against the Dutch, there was 6,000 empty seats at Villa Park. And you're going, it's only 4 hours down the road. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to think back about why wasn't there a mass invasion. But I don't know why it wasn't. But as I say, there were 6,000 empty seats. But obviously, Wembley's absolutely full on this Saturday. This game gets a massive build-up. Not like me and you, Paul. We remember the Rouse Cup games. We remember just the tail end of the home internationals and the Rouse Cup games. So used to play England every year, and eventually it didn't happen because some English fans kept on coming up to Glasgow and running amok, and it just sort of stopped. So this was a big thing. I think this was our first meeting probably since
1989.
89 or 90, I was going to say.
I remember a friendly. No, you're probably right, actually, because they beat us 2-0, and it was a game that Steve Bull scored for England in.
That was probably
the last game.
That was probably the last Rouse Cup game. Mm-hmm. So this was a big thing. First time we'd played each other in 6 years, and also the first time we'd ever played each other competitively in a tournament.
That's incredible. Just to go back on that other game at Villa Park against the Netherlands, the best player on the park, if you ever go back to watch the footage, was John Collins. He was immense. He was absolutely unplayable that day. Superb. One of the best performances I've ever seen from John Collins was in that game. He was brilliant.
John Collins is one of the greatest midfielders Scotland's ever produced. End of. There's no argument with that. The fact that I've spoke to you before about this, the fact that we had him and McStay in the same midfield for 6 years was utterly phenomenal, and we were rubbish when we were both of them in the midfield.
It was a shame that McStay, in terms of the injuries, had caught up with him by this stage. You know, we were moving into a period where McStay's performances were getting fewer and fewer. He should have enjoyed tournaments like this, Kev. I remember him in the 92 tournament and also in the World Cup 86 and 1990. So it's a shame that he didn't play more tournaments due to the injuries. But I agree with you. An incredible talent was Collins. It's just unfortunate he's one of these guys that Celtic fans, post-playing career, have come to dislike a lot. There's a lot of Celtic fans who didn't like John Collins.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not due to his performances, because he was a smashing player.
Scottish FM ref comes in. He says, first time since the 27th of May 1989 where it finished 2-0 to the English. And that's right, that would have been Steve Bull. That would have been... Bull was probably second division striker at that point.
It was bizarre, Bizarre. Wolves, and his strike partner was Andy Much, and it was Much and Bull always had a haircut very similar to the one you're sporting today. He always shaved his head.
He did.
Brilliant, but they were the lower division footballers playing for England. Incredible.
So, the Scotland team, that both teams come out, it's basically winner takes all. You win this game, you're virtually qualified for the knockout stage. So the Scotland team that day was Andy Gordon, boo. Colin Calderwood, Colin Hendry, boo. Tom Boyd, Stuart McKimmie, Tosh McKinley, Stuart McCall, boo. Gary McAllister, boo. John Collins, Gordon Dury, boo. John Spencer, boo.
Bizarre. No, the Spencer one threw me when I looked at that. I honestly had to read it twice. I couldn't believe. I certainly cannot remember him being on the park, John Spencer, for this game. But I remember what jeans I was wearing, but I can't remember John Spencer playing for Scotland.
It's the same way if somebody would have asked you, did Robert Fleck ever play in a World Cup? You would have went, no. Then he plays 2 games at Italia 90.
It's mad, I know.
And you're going, how can I not remember Robert Fleck playing for Scotland?
It's crazy.
It's John Spencer's virtually the same in this. And you go, John Spencer, really? He got into that team ahead of Kevin Gallagher.
It's frightening, eh? See, another thing, just because your mind plays tricks on you, Kev, I remember the 1989 World Cup finals. Obviously, they were played in Scotland. And I remember being at the semi at Tynecastle where we beat Portugal 1-0. Brian O'Neill scored the header. Lewis Figo, were you there? What a crowd. Figo was playing midfield for Portugal. There were other Portuguese greats playing there. But Craig Brown was the manager. It was only 7 years before this game we're talking about, because it was I think it was in June, the World Cup finals, not under 16s. And Craig Brown, 7 years previous, was at a World Cup final. So, people don't like his style. There's arguments around management at the moment. But he had a great record when it came to actually qualifying.
Definitely. The dude Abides comes in, he says, that Scotland lineup is the ugliest in history. I don't think there's much argument there. Well, can you call John Collins ugly?
No, he brought the average. He brought it right up. He, to be fair, he didn't have much backup, but Collins was a good-looking fella at that time.
He was, definitely. Well, who else is there? Gordon, aye, ugly. Calderwood. Calderwood, actually. No, we're doing this jokingly. We're not having a...
You're allowed to have a bit of humour, Kev.
This is... We didn't take this serious, so anything we say does not come serious. Right, Gordon, you've got a point. Calderwood, he always looked like a pound shop Littlewood's catalogue model. Eh? That's what he looked like. Colin Hendry, he looks like one of the Americans you see up Stirling Castle every summer.
And he still has the same hairdo all these years later, so I feel his pain.
Yes. Tom Boyd, aye, right, Tam, wasn't he there?
Gorgeous.
Stuart McKimmie. McKimmie was not a bad player. I'm not 100% sure about his looks, right enough.
Well,
McKimmie,
He's steady. Mediocre.
As a player or his looks?
No, he was a good player.
He was a good player, eh? He was always one of the boys when you're looking for a right back. You wondered if you could get him for Aberdeen.
He was a good player.
He was always solid enough. Tosh. Sorry,
gorgeous.
Tosh. Stuart McCall, another one with a stupid haircut. Again, we're having a laugh here, boys. Gary McAllister, he was going a bit bald at that point and a bit bean polish. Collins, absolute sex god. Gordon Dury.
Well, Dury was a fifer, so he was good looking as well.
And John Spencer was just like a wee hobbit who had been an extra for Lord of the Rings. Right, that's enough of the Scotland team.
I'm not sure how we got into that, Kev, but I'll run with it.
It was a dude Abide's fault.
Yeah.
He mentioned that Donny Boy 67, jukebox had a face for the radio. True. That's what I says I heard before Paul decided to put us on YouTube. Always says I had a face for the radio. Good view song, that. So we've got a massive build up to this game, And the first half is utter rubbish. The first half is utter forgetful. It's almost as if the players have forgotten that they've actually meant to be playing football.
Can I go back to Jukebox? Right. Couple of things. I always remember him. He was at Spurs when the Premier League launched. And can you remember the original Premier League videos? And it was Simple Minds. Don't you forget about me, right? Yes. And he's in it, and it was classic. You'll probably get it on YouTube, but he's in it for Spurs, and he's a Fifer, and he's one of the guys that if you speak to anybody around about the Inverkeithing area of Fife, Kevin, they'll tell you, that old myth. His brother was a better player. Campbell Dury, they reckon, was a better player than Gordon Dury. Didn't make the grade though, did he? But I always remember that he was in the video with Spurs, and it takes me on to the strips that Scotland were wearing that day. I don't know if you were going to mention this. You've got to mention the strips that Scotland were wearing in that tournament and for this particular game, because for me it's my favourite Scotland jersey of all time. The home jersey. Oh, the tartan one.
The tartan one. I think I can remember not liking it at the time. I think it was too shortbread-ish for my taste at that point. But then when I look back on it now, I'm going, that was quite a smart. It's like the Celtic top with the free bands. At the time, didn't like it, but now when I look back, I go, that's actually quite a decent top. That I would buy that. Aged
well. I liked the double diamond down the sleeves, because that was a throwback to classic kind of like early 80s Umbro designs. So I was a big fan of the tartan. Let's be honest, it's difficult to bring tartan into a football jersey design, and for it to work, Kev. There's been some horrific examples of this, but I think they got it right. I think Umbro got it right on this occasion.
I don't think they got the away top right, that yellow number with the dark blue.
Aye. That was
for me, my favourite Scotland top has to be the 86 World Cup one.
Home or away? Both.
Home. I like the home. Then the 1990 away one, the white with the dark blue and the yellow. I like that. That's the two.
Mexico 86 shorts, yes or no, with a hoop?
Did they work, did it? I
still like it because it was a hoop. So I was happy with that.
Kieran says, fashion and hair show tonight, get on with the football, Kev. Right. so I'm getting told to move on to the football.
Move on.
Facebook user, my fave is Italia 90 away. Have that. I agree with that. I completely agree with that. I also like the England third kit in Italia 90. The light blue that Bernard Sumner wears in the World in Motion video. I do like that kit. I wouldn't buy it, but I do actually like
classic
like
Umbro designs, mate. Classic Umbro templates.
So nothing happens until 53 minutes when Gary Neville bursts down the right hand side and crosses, and he catches out the three Scottish centre halves. He catches out Andy Gorn, and there's Alan Shearer doing what Alan Shearer does at the back of the post, putting it in the back of the net. Now Shearer's a bit of a polarised figure, but he could score goals, eh? He was a striker, eh?
Yeah, his record was phenomenal, Kev. And, he made it into the lyrics of a Celtic song when we went for Shearer, but we know the rest. But he was a phenomenal striker, and you've got to look at the fact that he could have probably signed for Man United, he could have probably signed for any club in England, but he wanted to go to his hometown team, and he didn't win enough trophies because of that. So, like him or loathe him, there's some good aspects to him as a player, and he was an incredible striker.
He was an incredible striker, and he always, as well, he was one of those players that you always wanted England to fail because he had that sort of arrogance about him. He always had that sort of little Englander arrogance, which I don't think a Geordie should actually have. Because for me, Geordies are just Scots folk who couldn't climb Hadrian's Wall. They couldn't work out how to get across it. So when you look at Shearer, and also, we'll have to say he's maybe a good guy because he invited us down for his testimonial.
Well, there was a time though, Kev, where if you wanted a full house, you invited Celtic. And it got to the point that I think we were getting played by a lot of them. You know, there was a lot of players down there with no association to Celtic. A lot of them obviously loved the club, etc. But, you know, we were going to these testimonials because we could behave and would fill your stadium. And then so obviously your payday was bigger. And there was various ones that I always felt, they're only asking us down because they know these two things are going to make a quick buck and we're not going to wreck the joint. And you know, other players like Beardsley who had an affinity with Celtic, I get that. But then, you know, did Ryan Giggs like Celtic? We went down there, packed the place out, gave him a few quid. Did Shearer really need 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 Celtic fans to go down there to sell at St James's Park? He probably could have sold it to Newcastle fans, to be fair.
I don't think he needed us, but that game was fixed as well. No, remember the penalty kick? Well, I was there, and the penalty kick that they got in the last minute, so he could so he could score. I was getting mixed up with Geordie Shore there, Geordie Score. So. Aye, stuff.
They're the only team, though. Newcastle are the only English. I've already spoken, you know, a lot about the fact I don't support an English team. I love Liverpool. I love the city. I love the club. I love everything that they stand for reasons we've discussed elsewhere on the podcast and that, Kev. I don't support an English football team, but the one team that I have watched more in person than any other is Newcastle. I've gone to more Newcastle games than Old Trafford or Anfield or any other stadium in England. I've gone to Newcastle more often than any other. There must be a reason for that. You know, I think I like the people. And I like the atmosphere. Obviously, the club itself, I think, is underperformed for years. But I did go down quite a bit in the 1990s to watch Newcastle. Haven't been to a game since the 4-4 game against Arsenal.
Right.
I left at half-time.
I know there's quite a few guys for Stirling go to watch Newcastle. They jump in the early train and get down and get the last train back up the road.
It's more about the day than the fact that I've got an affinity with the club. But I do like the fans. I do like the fan base.
I've been to Newcastle. I was at that testimonial. I also went to Newcastle against Middlesbrough. For some bizarre reason, and I've been to the Stadium of Light in Sunderland, but not to watch Celtic. It was to watch Sunderland against Liverpool, and up front that day for Liverpool was Fernando Torres and Robbie Keane. That shows you how long ago that was. Right, let's get back to this game. So Shearer's put England 1-0 up. Just after that, Gascoigne crosses the ball to Sheringham, and Andy Gorham does what Andy Gorham does and makes a fantastic save for a header to keep Scotland in the game. So the game's sort of livened up at this point, and Craig Bown makes a couple of substitutions. So Toss McKinlay links up with John Collins on the left-hand side, and Collins bursts into the box, pits out a great ball, and Gordon Jury should score with his header, but David Seaman, another great goalkeeper at that point, somehow managed to save the header. And so you're thinking to yourself, we're still in this game, Scotland are still in this game. And then comes the infamous penalty kick. So we're going to need to talk about the penalty kick. How we get the penalty is Stuart McKimmie bursts into, goes down the right-hand side, plays a great ball inside to Gordon Jury, who Tony Adams brings down. So when Tony Adams brings him down, he's got no complaints whatsoever that the penalty is given. There's none of this, what you see nowadays, the defender would have been up going, I never touched him. Adams knows himself, so he absolutely clattered him, and it's a stonewall penalty kick, and there's no argument that the referees gave the penalty. I actually laughed when I watched it back, just to see Adam's reaction. His reaction was like, I'll bring him down, that's it.
I'm doing a bit of the old digressing today, and I appreciate that, Kev, but I've got to bring this in. Remember, Tony Adams claimed that he was in for the Celtic job. Can you remember that? And then it was absolutely dismissed by the club.
Well, if he hangs around long enough, he might be in for the Celtic job again.
I'm trying to remember. Was it the 2010 appointment? Was it then? And he's actually come out and claimed that he's in talks with Celtic, and then Celtic dismissed it. Can you remember that? It was a bizarre
twist, yes.
Yes, aye.
Maybe Peter Lawwell's still got that file somewhere. And Tony Adams will reappear on the list of maybe as director of football or chief
Nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me, Kev.
Or something like that. So we get the penalty kick. And we all know what happens with the penalty kick. You've got that, what's his name, Yuri Geller saying that he moved the ball. See, for me, it's just a bad penalty kick. I think Gary McAllister absolutely bottles it. Mm-hmm. And instead of being cool, calm and collective, he actually just tries to go for power straight down the middle, but he puts it too much to his left-hand side. And it's an easy save for Seaman. It's at a great height for Seaman to actually save it. And what I'm going to say right now is, if John Collins takes that penalty kick, we won that game.
I was just going to say that. I totally agree with you. John Collins should have taken the kick, and we would have been talking about something completely different.
Definitely, because Collins would have scored that penalty kick. You saw it, what he done in the 1998 World Cup. Big opening game.
Mm-hmm. World stage.
The wee wink at the camera when the camera's passing. He would have loved to take that penalty kick. That was right up his street. That was him down to a T.
Cool. It'd have been cool. Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I think that, in a parallel universe, which I know you're a big fan of, that happens and it's a completely different outcome.
Definitely. So I watched this in a pub in Bannockburn, McHugh's, and I remember the place going mental when we got the penalty kick.
You spent a lot of time in McHugh's, mate, didn't you?
I did, aye. That's 2 weeks in a row I've mentioned it. They should actually start giving my dad free drink, because he drinks in there, eh? So maybe they should. He does watch this, actually, so hiya, Dad.
Can I just, again, a wee digression here, right? Daniel MC's coming in to say that he hates Seaman. I don't hate Seaman, right? But he is an absolute doppelganger for Paddy Considine.
He is.
Now he is now. Not the end with the ponytail and that, but now he is Paddy Considine. It's incredible how he's morphed into Considine. And
the dude Abides comes in again and says Tony Adams used to go out with Caprice.
I remember that.
That's true as well.
What was her second name though without Wikipedia in it?
I haven't got a clue. I'm not even going to guess it.
I'm going to go for Bourré. Can somebody check that? Bourré. Bourett or something. Aye, something like that. Aye, Caprice Bourré.
Aye, I didn't hate Seaman, but no, that's another one for the popular.
Kevin Graham.
Oh,
it's before the watershed, son.
It's Sunday day with goalkeepers, I think. Eh?
What are you like, man?
I know. Right, I'm moving swiftly on. Right, we missed the penalty kick. That Arsenal goalie then gets the ball, punts it up the park. Sheringham wins it, lays it to Darren. I'm keep on going. I'm no stopping. Darren Anderton plays it to Gascoigne, who lobs Colin Hendry. And the next time I see Colin Hendry flail like this is in the 5-1 game at Celtic Park. Mm-hmm. So Hendry falls on his arse here. And when you see him trying to catch Henrik Larsson in that 5-1 game, it's the exact same. It's the exact same panic, and it's almost as if he's trying to swat flies. And Gascoigne scores that goal and then goes away and does that celebration.
Again, can I interject? Can you remember, obviously, the circumstances behind the dentist chair? They've gone for a game against Hong Kong.
Yes.
Can you remember it? And Hong Kong were playing in pink. It was live on the telly, bizarrely. And they were wearing a pink kit. And there was some bizarre rule whereby they were able to play guys like Dave Watson, formerly of Everton. So he's playing for Hong Kong. And another guy that was playing was Lee Bullen. Lee Bullen from Pennycook. I played football with his wee brother Glenn. Right? And Lee Bullen had previously played for Meadowbank Thistle, Pennycook Athletic. He ends up in Hong Kong playing the international game. He's in the picture, I'm sure, of the original dentist chair. Lee Bullen's big wee brother played for S. Mills and Pennycook with me. So I'm looking at that going, is that the same Lee Bullen? And it was. He comes back to Britain and forges out a career with Dunfermline and Sheffield Wednesday. And I think he was at Falkirk, but he was the guy that was playing for Hong Kong that was before the dentist chair, and it was Lee Bullen from Pennycook. So there you go. Dentist chair, famous photo.
They also wrecked, did they not wreck a bar and wreck the plane on the way back as well? There was a big thing round about it. And the English press, as the English press do, turned on that side.
They did, in Gascoigne.
Gascoigne, especially, in the weeks before that tournament. I remember it well. So, but by the time you get to that tournament and that goal, next thing you know, Gascoigne's back to his World Cup 1990 popularity, and like England are going to win it. It's coming home, and we need to talk about that song. It's coming home. But I'm going to go back to my rational hatred of Ali McCoist here. No, remember I went on about it last week.
You did. I think that, listen, mate. I'm not sure if it's a hatred or a respect. I'm not sure which one it is. I think you secretly respect them.
I think it's a football fan thing. I think, see how sometimes football fans' minds are warped in certain ways. When I was watching the highlights back of this game, I didn't get annoyed with the penalty kick miss. I didn't get annoyed with Gascoigne's goal. I got annoyed with Ali McCoist laughing and joking with Paul Gascoigne at the final whistle when they were swapping tops. I got annoyed with that. And
can I ask you, Kev, right? Because you obviously do have a deep-rooted issue with Alistair McCoist. Is there a Rangers player that you've ever looked at and thought, I quite like him?
Loudrop. Didn't even have to.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. What was there not to like, other than the fact that he used to rip us to pieces? Unless I known he was marking him. What was there not to like about him? He was a class player, and I think he was a bit of a class act off the park as well. So
he was, and I mean, it must be quite hard having a brother that's more talented than you.
He was the third best player in his house. You said it last week. His dad was a better player as well.
So, Loudrop of foot. I mean, you look at guys everybody like myself who grew up watching Celtic in the 90s, and you look doing these Screamacelicas, you look back and you look at some of the Rangers team at that time. When I mentioned that Rangers back line, like Petrick last week, Cleland, and you go, how did we not absolutely rip them with that Celtic team that we had? And it's the same having a look at this. You see Henry Calderwood, and you go, why did we actually manage to go through qualification only losing one game? It's because they were organised. These boys knew their job. Didn't matter that they weren't great, but they were better than me and you because they're playing at that level of football, but they understood how to defend, and that's all they were there to do. And it's something that they... Here's the
thing, Kev, right? I wasn't quite sure what my point was in relation to the fact that Brown had taken the under-16s to the World Cup finals, but surely if the under-16s go to the World Cup finals 7 years before this game, they should be in their prime. The crop of Scotland's talent in 1989 would be 26 years of age by the time this game comes around, right? No, wait a minute, they're 16 back then, so they'll be 22, 23. But none of them are in the squad. Not a single player is in the squad.
That's a damning, that's a podcast in itself, to have a look at what happened to that 1990 team.
So they're 23. They're 23 at the time that this game's played, and not a single player's in the squad.
That is an incredible. That is an incredible put down to Scottish football of that team, of what happened to those players. I mean, obviously Paul Dickoff would probably be the only one. Brian O'Neill as well. Dickoff and O'Neill were the only ones that you would say had a career, a career at the highest level. But even then, Dickoff went down to League Division 2 with Man City at the time,
No, you're right. I mean, I remember the team well because obviously we went to the game. It was guys like, I think Jim Beattie was playing. Jim has been diagnosed with MND fairly recently. But you're struggling. Ian Downey played. He was the Valafield connection. He played. He was with Aberdeen at the time. I can tell you what he's doing. He's a postman in Inverkeithing. But the point remains, at that point we were World Cup finalists. We were cheated out the final by a Saudi Arabian team who were over age, some of them anyway. And by the age of 23, they're all kind of like, either journeyman footballers dropping down leagues, Kev, or out the game.
I remember there was a guy called Watt was the captain. Was it Jim? Did he not end up at Brecon and play a long time at Brecon? I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember
Kevin Bain. Kevin Bain ended up at Dundee or Falkirk. But you're right. Watt was with Arsenal at the time of the finals. But interesting.
That Saudi team, Kieran comes back, and that Saudi team over age. I know they were over age because my pal was a bouncer at the Foo Bar when they tried to get in the night after they won the World Cup.
Now, the Foo Bar, you remember it for various reasons, Kev. I was far more fond of the kebab shop next door, which had the best name ever. It was Abra Kebabra.
Abra Kebabra. Nah.
Great. That was when that's when I used to eat meat.
It's the same with the Chinese on the way to Dalgety Bay, called the Phony Inn. There's a sign for it on the road if you're going, and it's called the Phony Inn. So we all know what happened, and we all know what happens after this game. Ali McCoy scores against the Swiss, but the fact that Patrick Kluivert scores a consolation goal in a 4-1 defeat to England means that we go out and goal scored, and it's another heartache for Scotland. But I think, looking back on that game, it was a good day. It was a decent day. And what I can remember about that day, and we'll just move on to the music bit just now, is the music round about at that time.
100%.
The music round about at that time. And what I'm going to speak about first before we go on to what the headline is, was the Manic Street Preachers had just released Everything Must Go. And I remember hearing a Design for Life everywhere about this tournament, and it's actually like a soundtrack to this tournament. And also when England got put out on penalty kicks by Germany, they played Walk Away with Cast as well, which I always remember as well. That's kind of slow montages, and you've got John Powers singing that beautiful song over the top of it. And I remember that, but I reckon a Design for Life was used quite a lot in that tournament as well. That's a great album by the Manics, eh?
Aye, I think it is. And it was one of the ones where when you look at what the band had gone through as well, Kev, and everybody knows the heartache that would have caused. And they came back. A lot of Manics fans would say it's not their best album. It was certainly the most palatable to a wider audience at that stage. And all the singles were big hitting singles. And then they obviously did the festival circuit. And it's like you say, that tune was everywhere, and there was a real resurgence of Welsh bands around about that time, because another album that I was into in that year was the Super Furry Animals. There was a few other Welsh bands around about that time, so it's interesting how sometimes a clutch of bands from an area, because Wales is a country, but they talk about Scotland like we're just an area as well, or a specific time period, Manchester or Liverpool bands, but interestingly enough, I think we're actually now in an era where there's a clutch of Scottish bands coming through the now as well, and I hope that creates, and I don't like the word a scene, but I hope it creates a vibe where these bands can come through and flourish. But yeah, I was a big fan of the Manics, I've got to say. I was a big fan, and I kind of done my usual. I was into them for 3 albums and then left them.
Well, I must admit, I don't own this album, but I remember it at this time because what I also remember about this time, the local shop in Bannockburn, you could get 8 cans of Muller for a £5. That was a Euro 96 deal. So you were like, get in there for a £5, you were getting absolutely steaming. And you would go to somebody's house to watch it, and this album was always on. And that's where I remember it from, eh? I don't own the album, but when I listened to it today, I could remember every tune off it.
I've got two copies because one of them came in from Britannia. I'd already bought it. And you could never return these things, Kev. Russell and I had this discussion. I remember the Britannia Music Club. So I already had the album and this thing dropped in. You ended up paying about 18 quid for it. So I would offer it to you, but I'm sure you don't even have a CD player.
I don't actually know. I don't actually have a CD player. Not even in the car anymore.
Right, I've sent you a picture of my CD player. It's in my kitchen. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
It's going to turn 25 next year. I bought it with my first wage.
It's a cracking CD player.
I know.
That's a cracking CD player. I love it. I love the retro feel to it and like the display.
It's a Technics with blue neon lights. It's just...
It's fantastic. If you put that on eBay now, some hipster, West End hipster would give you 1,000 quid for it.
It's going nowhere.
He would.
It's going nowhere. But yeah, that year, I know you're going to go through your music, but I was going to ask you a wee teaser.
Okay.
Do you know who won the Mercury Music Prize in 1996?
1996. No.
Pulp, Different Class.
Was it? Wow. I wouldn't have guessed that, obviously.
Another cracking album, it's got to be said.
Another one that
Big
I remember,
fan.
and another one that I don't own, but I remember about over that year, again, just being in certain places where the album's on. I've got a lot of albums round about that time that I don't own, but I know inside out because I heard them that many times. And that's what, when Euro 96 was starting, the Manics came out with that album. And I just remember that was the sort of soundtrack. Obviously, you had the other side. It was the Manics album and also the Trainspotting soundtrack. That was still carried on from the year before. That was still massive. And the group of friends I was kicking about with at that time, they were the two albums that were getting played quite a bit.
You've mentioned that album a few times. It's an excellent soundtrack, but I don't know, did you mention why Oasis weren't on it?
No.
Do you know the reason why they weren't on it?
Is it Son Today with Noel Gallagher being what Liam called him in that tweet?
Well, they were approached to be on it. I mean, they're the glaring omission from that soundtrack of that time, Kevin. When you look at the playlist, you know, at that time you're thinking, where's Oasis, right? But Noel hadn't read the book, right? And he claims his favourite book is On the Road by Kerouac. I don't think he's read that either. But he hadn't read the book and he thought, Trainspotting, why would I want to put a song on a soundtrack about Trainspotting? So he refused. And he now talks about it, but he was approached and he refused. And, you know, the rest is history. But there you go.
That's like the old Gav Whelan for the Happy Mondays. Friend of yourself, he's messaged you a couple of times. When he has the joke that if you ask Noel what his favourite Beatles album, he says the greatest hits.
I know. I mean, the thing is though, right, a lot of people have said that his musical kind of collection wasn't that eclectic, you know, even right up to the point where he goes away to be the roadie in Spirals, and he was all about buying greatest hits compilations. And when you look at that latest release that's coming out, I think next week, 10 years in Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds, it's based on a Bee Gees greatest hits album. The design is based on a Bee Gees greatest hits album, which apparently he bought in a service station somewhere when he was on the road within Spirals. So I don't think Noel Gallagher, his kind of musical ingredients were there in the early days. I think that, in time, he's managed to amass a much wider kind of list of influences. But back then, you know, he was buying greatest hits albums by the Bee Gees. No, there's no shame in that. But
no shame in that whatsoever. No shame in that whatsoever. But then you have a look at guy that we love, and there's guys in the comments mentioning Lee Mavers. Lee Mavers is an utter genius, but another Scouse genius is a guy called Michael Head, which you've spoke about very, very often on every podcast that we actually do. We seem to talk about Jason Pierce and Michael Head. Mm-hmm. And Mick Head, in the interviews, has actually admitted his record collection is not eclectic. No. I think he says he stopped buying records when he bought Love's album.
Forever Changes.
Forever Changes. I think he said he didn't need another record after that.
I get that though. I mean, you listen to that and you think, well, Is there anything else? Do you really need to listen? That is still, it's always in my top 3. Sometimes goes up to 1, sometimes drops to 2. It's always my top 3 albums of all time. 1967, Forever Changes. Immense album.
It's a great album, mate. It's an utterly fantastic album. But then you've got Mick Head at that end of the scale. Then you've got Bobby Gillespie. And Bobby Gillespie is an utter music head.
He's a total vampire, mate. He doesn't age. He looks the same today as he did when he was playing drums in the Jesus and Mary chain. He doesn't age. I'm sure he's a vampire. Remember that time? No, it wasn't a year, but remember that time I got the old backstage treatment at the bar as the last gig I was at. And Gillespie's there, and I'm thinking, he's not aged, mate.
But when you hear and read Gillespie speaking and talking about music, he has got his record collection is vast.
It's incredible.
He's a right obsessive about music, whereas some, I think if he asked me what's your favourite album and I say the Stone Roses would probably refuse to talk to me. I think that would be the type of, I think he's a bit of a musical snob, according to people that have met him. But
then I get, the Roses album, which I loved. There's no other album on this planet that I've listened to more than the debut album by the Stone Roses. But I think the likes of Gillespie and all that, what they do is they go to the roots, don't they? They go to the roots of the music that thereafter appears 30 years later. So they dig down, like Can, for example. He becomes obsessed with Can, and he basically goes out there. There's a great video on YouTube of him record picking. And the records that he's picking out in this obscure record store, I don't think anybody will have heard of them, but he's doing it because there's a great track or a great bass line or something. His musical knowledge is immense. I'm looking forward to his autobiography coming out.
Definitely, and he's got some solo stuff coming out as well, and the first single that's been released off it, if they do singles, has been really, really good. Mm-hmm. We'll have a look, since we've mentioned Bobby Gillespie, we may as well have a look at what the title of this podcast is. Now, in the charts of the week that Scotland played England, number 1 is Killing Me Softly by the Fugees.
Great tune.
I went to see Lauren Hill 3 years ago at the Hydro. Fantastic night. Number 2 is Free Lions. Whatever you actually say about it, it's a tune. It is one of the best football songs ever written.
Can I just, again, a wee interjection, right? Ian Broody produced the Pale Fountains. You know the 2 Pale Fountains albums? Obviously, Mick Head, who you've just mentioned there, his first band were the Pale Fountains. Ian Broody produced them. They're a band that if you were ever to buy or go into your playlist and do a random Britpop thing or 90s indie music or whatever, there's always a Lightning Seeds song in there, Kev, right? And I'm prepared to say this, and people might shout me down. I cannot stand the Lightning Seeds, mate. Can't stand them. They're rotten.
But then when you hear The Life of Riley at Match of the Day, you go, that's a cracking wee bit of a tune now, that's catchy. He's got that wee, he can hit you with 30 settings, and you go, you ken what you're doing there. And he knew what he was doing with Free Lines. Free Lines probably caught the mood of the English nation, using the fantasy football guys as well. Badil and Skinner. And I'll put my hands up. I do not mind Free Lines as a song.
I'm going to bring this up, Kev, because my job tonight is just to take you off the beaten track. Who was in the picture? This is actually leading into what Kevin's going to talk about. This is the front cover of the song that we're talking about. It's when Primal Scream and Irvine Welsh teamed up. And when was that incident there where they obviously stormed the pitch at Wembley? 1977. And they snapped it. So we've got it framed in the studio.
Basically what actually happened was the Primal Scream, Irvine Welsh and the U sound system came up with an alternative Scotland song for Euro 96. And the week that we were playing at Wembley, at number 16 at the charts was the official Scotland squad song, Rod Stewart and the Scotland squad with Purple Heather. That was the official Scotland squad for Euro 96. Scotland song for Euro 96, sorry. And at number 17 is the Big Man and the Scream Team. And you sound, the song is called Big Man and the Scream Team Meet the Barmy Army Uptown. And that was number 17 at the charts. And now, Paul's holding up there as the front cover.
That's front cover, but I'm going to, underneath it says 800 years, the oppression continues. The original version banned by UEFA, available on this single only. Limited edition release for 1 week on the 3rd of June 1996. 12-inch CD MC. There you go.
Now, why was it banned by UEFA? It's probably a little known song, even though it got to number 17 in the charts at that, because it's kind of been thrown together by bits that have been left over by the Primal Scream's Vanishing Point. It's got that sort of dub feel. It's got the song Train Spotting dub feel about it. And it's got like sample crowd noises, and it's got backing singers singing Who Are Ye? It's got crowd noises. Then Irvine Welsh comes in with lyrics, poems, spoken word bit. And he actually says, in every hick town in Caledonia, across this puzzled nation, you can see the most effed up scum ever est into creation, where a blue McEwen's lager top equals no imagination. You're unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable.
That is why it was banned by UEFA. That is why nobody in Scotland wanted anything to do with it. And that's why it made the front page of the Daily Record Sunday Mail being Irvine Welsh, who was the biggest author on the planet at this point. Controversy. And when I actually read that out there, I was like, I can't believe that I ended up at number 17 in the charts.
It's fantastic. When you think about where Irvine Welsh was in his own kind of like journey, so he released Train Spotting in 93, Maribou Stork Nightmares, which is still my favourite ever Irvine Welsh book, and that came out in 1995. The Acid House in 94, and Ecstasy, Three Tales of Chemical Romance in 96, just before the finals. So he was hot property. And, you know, I know that he's a big hibbie. I don't think he's a massive lover of Celtic either, to be fair, but whenever he's talking about Rangers, he just gets wired right in, and he did that on this song.
He doesn't miss, and there's another version of this song where it's just him doing the vocals. And some of the
what do you think happens to all the bevy outside the ground? He goes on like that, eh? All the bevy that gets confiscated by the police.
Well, this was one that didn't, and it's a question that we've all asked. And he actually says, what do the police do with all the confiscated bevy? Buckets and bags of it. Give it to the jakies, drink it themselves, maybe. Give it back to the retailers to sell it back to us. Again, the C's.
The thing, I can tell you exactly what the police do with the bevy.
They drink it for the Christmas party.
A lot of it is drank in CID offices. There's wee fridges all over the place, and others is kind of saved up so they can get that promo shot, you know, in America where they confiscate big kind of like machine guns and everything, and we've got a couple of bottles of 2020 and we pour them down a sink and all this kind of stuff and get a photo opportunity. But a lot of it is drank if it's bottles of beer that's not been cracked on.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first. The other line that Irvine Welsh comes in with, he says, the mystery of Scottish sport is why we hate the English so. I love the English very, very much, as long as they don't beat us in the European Nations Cup. You're unbelievable.
And he says, cut. He says, cut. You're unbelievable. Brilliant.
And it's one of these... I bought this single. I did buy
I've got it. I've got it on CD, mate.
I've got it on CD as well, eh? And when I went back to listen to this as well, I was going, that's actually better than what I thought it was. There's a bit towards the end when Andrew Innes and Frob come in with the guitars, and it gets a bit funky towards the end. And it's like, it's good.
You know it appeared on an album, though? You realise it did appear on an album, Kev? Did you know that? Not a Primal Scream album.
What album did that appear on?
This actually appeared on an official compilation album And track 1 on that album was Three Lions. Primal Scream appeared on track 8. And there was a World in Motion remix, track 7. Various other bands. Black Grape wrote a song called England's Irie with Joe Strummer and Keith Allen. Don't know if you remember that. Yep, and interestingly enough, and I'm just trying to find it here, right? The Gyres were on it. Remember the Scottish band, the Gyres? They were on this album. And Northern Uproar were on this album with a song called I Am the Cosmos. It's a 22-track album for this tournament, an official album, Kev.
And the Scream team in Irvine, Welsh ended up on this album.
Mm-hmm.
That's unbelievable. Again, it's one of these that would never get passed anywhere nowadays.
No,
it would never. There would be cancel police everywhere going, "Oh, you can't say that. You can't say that." We'll probably get in trouble for actually just reading the lyrics to a song that was in the charts in 1996.
Fair usage, mate. You're quoting it.
I know. It's what I have to ask is his statement about every hick town in Caledonia. Has they really changed in the 25 years?
I know, across the pseudo nation. Yep, absolutely.
Has they really changed in the 25 years of the scenes for George Square or anything or anything to go by in the last couple of weeks?
If anything, it's got worse, Kev. If anything, it's got worse.
Where a blue 32 red Castor top boat for Turkey equals no imagination.
Yes, we could actually do a remix version for this tournament if you wish, Kev. You could do the voiceover, but I think I got that poster free. I'm sure I did. I bought that single in a shop in Dunfermline called.
I think you got a poster with it. Did you?
Yeah, I think I got that poster. I'm sure I did, and I kept it. And obviously there it is. I try to remember the name of that record shop. It wasn't Vinyl Villains because that was in Edinburgh. Eh? But I kept the poster. I put it in a frame. There you go.
Aye, that was good to go back down that wee memory lane.
Third base. That was the name of the shop in Dunfermline. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Any album you want to talk about that time, Paul, or we just...
Mate, I must admit, that time in my life, I was absolutely, all my money was going on chippy jeans and music, really. And when you look at 1996, Black Grape is great when you're straight, yeah. Still listen to that album to this day. Manic Street Preachers you've mentioned already. Pulp was a big one for me. But remember the War Child album, Help, came out that year as well.
Yes, that's right, aye.
I listened to that a hell of a lot because there was a couple of really good versions of songs by the Stone Roses and Oasis on it as well. There was Murder Ballads by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, DJ Shadow, Introducing, Super Furry Animals with Fuzzy Logic. Brilliant. When I look back there, I know that you guys are struggling actually to get years kind of like in the last 20 years where it's a good year for music. And then you go back to 1996 and there's so many brilliant albums. Nas, it was written, obviously Nas gave us the name for a Celtic State of Mind, a New York State of Mind. So loads of brilliant albums. And but I've got to say, out of all of them, the one that really has, for me, still stood the test of time is Black Grape. Even though that single that was on the album was England's Irie, it was the worst thing they ever did. It was rotten. Terrible song.
No, it was terrible. It was absolutely rotten. As you say, it was a fantastic time for music, and it was also a fantastic time for football. That tournament was great. I always remember being impressed by the Croatians in that tournament as well. Davor Suker. They actually became my second favourite. My second. I supported the Croatia after Scotland went out because I wanted them to do well, just because of the whole backstory, and they were a talented side. I loved that tournament. It was a great time to be 20, and hopefully this tournament lives up to some of its build up. But there's no fans, That's.
I was listening in. There was one of the shows a few weeks ago with Stephen Scragg, and he was talking about the demise or the European Cup Winners' Cup. He's written a book about it, but he's done it in such a way that it's so informative but also quite humorous. And he was on one of the other shows talking about how when you're growing up, there's 3 or 4 tournaments that you remember everything about Kev. I mean, everything from the football that was used to all the strips, all the players, blah, blah, blah. He says, but as you get older and you see more and more tournaments, they become less and less memorable, less and less special. He says, and he wondered about that, all through his kind of football supporting life. But it just comes down to the fact that, you're taking in so much more when you're younger. You're like a sponge taking all this in. You watch every single kick of every single game. But, by this age, when was the last time I was excited about a finals tournament? I remember cheering on Wales when they were doing so well, under Chris Coleman. But it's simply because Scotland haven't been in it. I've got to be honest with you, and I do lose a wee bit of interest. I've always had a liking for Croatia because of just basically some of the players that have played over the years as well. But I think back to that, and I think back to it being heady time, 17-year-old, sunny summer's day. One of the other things I checked before coming on was just before that game, a couple of weeks before it, the movie Fargo was released. 1996, Coen Brothers, one of my favourite films of all time. I've only just in the last few weeks got around to watching the TV series, so I'm engulfed in that now. But is there as much excitement? One point I would make, when I was looking at that Scotland v England game in the lineups, you never mentioned Terry Venables, right?
No.
Now, obviously, they got in a bit of bother with the drinking culture and all that, Kev, but what they did have is they reckon they had almost like a club culture at international level. Now, that obviously can lead to incidents like the dentist chair and all that. But I was looking at that today, that Scotland squad, and Steve Clarke, who was getting interviewed today on the eve of the friendly game tomorrow night. And I was thinking to myself, they seem to have that bond, almost like a club, where, I don't know if it's just the right mix of experience with the young, hungry guys coming through, Kev, but they do seem to have that bond. And that's something that a Scotland team's not had in a long, long time. It's been pretty fractured, you know what I mean? We've gone through a lot of players, a lot of managers. But now I think we've finally found a blend where it's almost as if we've got the club side mentality and camaraderie amongst the squad. And I just think Steve Clarke's worked absolute wonders with that. And I'm delighted that, when you look back at some of the previous managers refusing to play specific players, and famously Strachan refusing to play Griffiths when he was at the top of his game, scoring 40 goals in a season. He eventually did. He relented and he started playing them. And when it came up to announcing the squad, I thought to myself, is Clarke going to pick the likes of Gilman? Is he going to pick the likes of David Turnbull? And I'm delighted that he did. Because tournaments like that could be the making of these players.
I think Clarke's got the knack. He had respect just because of his backstory, like Chelsea, Liverpool, what he done at Kilmarnock. And if these lads want to go to international duty, and I think there's a core of them that really do want to play for their country, guys like KT, Andy Robertson, John McGinn, want to turn up and play for their country. And I think Clarke, obviously getting to a tournament helps greatly, utterly greatly, and that helps. But I think Clarke was always the right man for the Scotland job. When the Scotland job came up, I says it should be Steve Clarke's. He should be the top candidate. And
would you take him at Celtic?
Look, somebody in one of my WhatsApp groups says, you ken what's going to happen, eh? He says, Big Angie is not going to get a work permit, and we're just going to wait till after the Euros and appoint Steve Clarke as a happy medium. And I think at this precise moment in time, we've been that weighed down by everything. I would take Steve Clarke, I would take Steve Clarke. He wouldn't be my first choice, but I would take Steve Clarke, and I would be confident of Steve Clarke coming in and turning that ship around. I would be.
Well, it's an interesting one. He spoke fairly recently, didn't he, about the time where he was offered. Well, he wasn't offered it. He was interviewed for the job, and he was second choice. He came second. He didn't get it. I'm looking at it, and I just think that people going about boring or a brandy football, Kev. What we need right now is stabilised. That's what Celtic require right now. We need stabilised. I feel we had I thought it was a great discussion earlier on the ACSOM bulletin. Because Jared Hill came on and he's watched the development of Ange, not Angie. He says not Angie, Ange, and he reckons that he would do well. He also says he's not his first choice. I've got real concerns about the timing of this. I don't think that is the type of appointment we need right now. Steve Clarke wouldn't be my first choice either, but I think he would be a stabilising influence, and that's what we need right now. We cannot wait, until a new manager integrates himself and acclimatises, which apparently this chap does. Takes him about 12 months. We don't have 12 months. We've got about 50 days.
We might actually need 12 months, Paul, and that's what a lot of the support might need to actually get on board with. And I mean, as you say, he's somebody to steady the ship. We're basically going doing a whole day and a wheelie with only one wheel at this precise moment in time. It looks like we didn't ken how it's going to end. We actually look like we do not have a clue what we're now doing, and that is a worrying thing. But we were all here last week, and I says it was going to be how, and everybody thought it was going to be how, and that came back to bite us quite big style. And I think a lot of the toxicity that we've seen over the last couple of days in the Celtic world is down to the club being an utter rudderless ship.
Talking of which, you want to know what Mark Hughes was up to in 1996 in June?
Let me know what Mark Hughes was up to in 1996 in June.
Mark Hughes was playing for the fourth club that he played with who have won the European Cup. Bayern Munich. Chelsea.
Oh, aye.
Was it Chelsea, aye?
I forgot he had went to Chelsea, aye. He went to Chelsea.
He was there for a couple of years, so aye, that's where Sparky was, just in case you were wondering.
I wondered where he was. I mean, you mentioned Chris Coleman, and I thought you were going to chuck in. I thought you were going to chuck in Sparky at that point, because we like talking about Sparky, don't we?
Another guy that got a testimonial against Celtic.
He did that, and we've mentioned Shearer, Sparky, and Manic Street Preachers was talked about Australia. There we go. Right, I think we'll call it a night there, Paulie. So, thanks.
You're the boss, mate. You're the boss.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go and check out the Primal Scream with Irvine Welsh. If nothing, it's a laugh, but it's quite a decent tune. And everybody, just calm down and be nice to each other. See you all later.